Good evening. This is the Selectmen's meeting for November 26th, 2013. And I guess we'll start by announcing that the meeting is being recorded, and we'll take a moment to appreciate our servicemen and women serving around the world. We also want to announce that a longtime Medfield firefighter, Robert Bond, died recently. And I guess this is the Selectmen's meeting that's all about the assessors.
Do you want me to officially make a motion?
Oh, that's right. I
Chair?
forgot. Yeah,
I
sorry.
actually move that Pete Peterson act as chairman for this meeting.
I was just usurping it, I'm sorry. And I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep, and I'll move that Mr. DeSorga be the clerk for the meeting.
Aye.
All in favor? Yep.
Aye.
And we have a tax classification hearing with the Board of Assessors. Frank Perry, chairman. This is when when the assessors tell the town whether we should have a single tax rate or a split tax rate, with the commercial rate paying a higher rate than the residential.
Okay, did you receive the packets?
We did.
You did. Okay. Every year we have to go through this process of whether we classify, whether we adopt a split rate or we don't adopt a split rate. Typically, towns that have 15 to 20% resident, commercial industrial may go to a split rate. We're approximately 94% residential and 6% commercial industrial, so it really doesn't make a lot of sense. You'll see on the illustration that if there's no shift factor with a projected rate of 1612, the average house in town at 600,000 would have a tax bill of $9,672. Below that, you'll see commercial industrial, the same amount, same tax bill. If we were to shift at 150%,
So the commercial then pays 150, a rate that's 150% of the residential?
Yes.
Okay.
And the result is, going with that 150% shift, the residential property owners would save $292 on their total tax bill with that same $600,000 house. And the commercial industrial tax bill would go up by $4,836. So that, given the lack of industrial we have and the hard time a lot of the commercial property owners have here, it really makes no sense. And this has been true for the past 15 or 20, as long as I can remember.
Well, I think plus we're trying to encourage, small industries and stuff to come here to Medfield. It's kind of a win-win situation. You don't want to scare them away and drive them away. You want to encourage them.
I mean, with 6% commercial industrial, it just makes no sense at all.
And that's because the increased burden on the commercial is so great that we're going to drive away whatever commercial we have.
Whatever we have, and the benefit to the residential owner is so minimal. So it's up to the Board of Selectmen whether to, whether they stay with the single rate or they would like to go to a split rate. And the back page is a what-if type of analysis that shows up. I mean, it doesn't have to be 150% split or shift. I mean, it can be virtually integrated. You guys decide on.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue with the single rate as advised by the Board of Assessors.
I would second that. Any further discussion? Mike, any?
No, I think that makes sense, and I think that's how we proceeded. We should continue.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. No opposed, and so then we'll roll along right into our next appointment, which is, again, the assessors.
We've gone through our budget, which is still in kind of in the works.
Close the hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you give us your budget, apparently we have to close our hearing. So do we have to do
Just
Declare it
close
closed?
the hearing, declare it closed. yeah.
Okay, hearing's closed. Now we're into budgets.
All right, I think you're gonna like this. we're within the recommended 2.5% without even really looking to do that.
Excuse me, Ed, for just a second. Did you have a copy of the budget?
I do not.
I don't either.
No, we don't have.
Well, you got a real problem there. We're gonna have to accept whatever we.
All right, well, just try to be clear, because we're, you know,
In a nutshell, the salary part is pretty much set in stone. I think the warrant committee has recommended 2.5% across the board. So we have one paid employee in our budget. We have some office staff in the town administrator's budget, but he would have the 2.5% increase against his base pay. His longevity would go up $50 from $400 to $450. The assessor's salaries would stay flat at $2,700, unless you want to increase. So that would come out to a total salary budget of $90,483, which is, again, within the guidelines. Then in terms of the miscellaneous items, the non-salary items, the only increases we are requesting are in printing, postage, and stationery. Last year it was 500, we want to go to 600, an increase of 100, because we're going to be sending out more commercial requests of commercial property owners for expense and income statements. We have a 3-year plan with the Department of Revenue. They are stepping up the pace a little bit on our, being more specific on our commercial property. So we'll need a little bit more money in postage for that. And the other increase is in our contract with Patriot Systems. Our budget last year was $6,000. This is just by contract. It will go up to $6,500. That includes their software services to the town through its assessors and the licensing fee. So our total requested increase in the non-salaried items is $600, which again comes to exactly 2.5% over last year's. So the grand total is, of the non-salary is $23,872. Last year was $23,272. Salaries are, the total budget, including salaries, is $114,355. That's our request.
I'm sorry, what was that? Can you repeat that, Ed?
114,355 is our total request.
Ed, do you see, one of the goals the selectmen had was to see if each of the boards, did we say 3-year or 5-year?
I think we said 5-year.
5-year, that you can look, just kind of a little long-range planning down into the future. Do you see anything in the next 5 years? You don't have to answer this now, but we're trying to see if each board can give us a little look down into the future, if there's going to be expenses coming up down the road.
I think expenses were 3-year and planning was 5-year.
Okay.
Well, I think our expenses are pretty much set in stone. If they go up, it's out of our control, and we have to do, in order to comply with the law, what we have to do. Our budget is pretty much the same from year to year. We have the contract with Patriot. We have to maintain the server. We kick in with the highway department on the GIS system, the Polaris system, I think it's called, for the updating of the maps, having records of all the utility systems in the ground. Ken's department, Ken Feeney's department, I think pays 15 out of the 20,000. We have 5,000 for that. So we're pretty much set in stone. I don't know of any major expenses upcoming. We have a 7-year cyclical review whereby we have to review all properties, comparing what actually exists with our record cards, which are online. That requires some manpower, but we take advantage of the workout program. And then we have 1 or 2 people who we pay by the hour. Sometimes they're workout people who go beyond the basis, the basic $500 they receive against their taxes. But I don't know of any.
No, I think we're kind of at the mercy of DOR, what they come up with, or new regulations or whatever, and if they demand a new system or something like that, you know.
That's just how we operate. We're sort of a unique type operation. We don't have a lot of control over our budget, but I don't think it's a big budget either.
Now, you people did work with a tax collector converting the motor vehicle excise to
Right.
a new system this year, and really no
Actually, Mike,
cost,
we just got into a new personal property system. That's personal property in businesses that we can, that are taxable under the law. We formerly had a more manual system with a vendor who wasn't interested in continuing on because the Department of Revenue wanted to kick it up a step. So we have engaged Patriot Systems in a 3-year contract for valuing our personal property and linking it with their software system. It's the same cost as we had been paying for the former vendor. So that is not an increase, but it is a change. That's a good point, Mike. We also have a 3-year plan with DOR working toward our next townwide revaluation. We go through that every 3 years, you know about that. This is an interim year. Next year will be an interim year. The 3rd year, FY16, we will have to be kicked up a couple of notches in terms of what we have, and that would include the improved personal property system. We also, this is mostly the Treasurer Tax Collectors Department, have engaged Patriot Systems for the motor vehicle excise system. We have something to do with that. Our employee Kathy Mills has given it a good report. She's still having a little bit of trouble getting used to the new system, but that is, again, kicked up a notch from the system we had before, the motor vehicle excise system. But we're just, our job basically is to meet the requirements of the law so that we can keep property values fair and balanced in accordance with the law. And that's a pretty big job in and of itself. We try to keep updated with the Assessors associations, and we have some subscriptions that keep us updated. Tom Sweeney, the 3rd assessor, and our deputy assessor, Stan Bergeron, go to a lot of the associational meetings and get briefed at those and bring back information for us. So we're trying to keep abreast of what's going on, but the bottom line is exactly as Frank says, we have to do what the state says we have to do to be able to set the tax rate so that we can collect the revenue that town meeting appropriates.
Well, in, I think you said in fiscal year, would it be 16, that you're going to have the town-wide reevaluation again?
Right.
Is there additional monies and things that would be needed for that?
We usually pick up our budget a little bit then, but not a whole lot. A lot of the work gets done in the year-to-year cyclical review, the 7-year cycle process. We have, Stan goes out, and then at least one of our work-off or paid staff people will go out and knock on doors and check houses and get the material we have to get. But so much of that is computerized. It's based upon sales, actual sales in the town of Medfield. That's what the law requires us to use as our basis for determining whether we are fairly valued. DOR goes over with a fine-tooth comb, but that's all part of our contract with Patriot Systems. It might cost us a little more 2 years from now, but we'll deal with that in a future budget. It's not a big number.
Okay.
It's going to be a big number.
And where we do interim appraisals, if your values are off, I think it's 10%, in any year in between, you have to do an interim revaluation, so that they really don't get off by too much. It's not like you're waiting 3 years and the values are changing 30 or 40% sometimes. It's, by doing it every year, kind of keeps things in line.
Our biggest weakness with DOR is that, as Frank said earlier, we only have a 5 or 6% commercial industrial tax base as against the whole townwide $2.25 billion assessed valuations. So sometimes they think that they want to look more closely at our valuations because we have so few to use as a basis of determining what the miscellaneous properties are worth. But in terms of residential, we have enough material really to not have much difficulty with meeting that 10% requirement, the assessment sales ratio that the DOR requires we meet in terms of our valuations compared with actual sales in order to be able to set the tax rate. That's how the system works.
The thing I find hard when people say, what did the taxes go up last year? And I can tell you what the tax rate went up, but because you have to do interim valuations every year, it depends on whether their values went up faster or slower than the rest of the town. So you say, well, taxes went up 2.5%. And they'll say, well, my tax went up more than that. And if their value goes up faster than the rest of the town, that may be true. In other cases, they may have gone up less than 2.5%. And unless you know the value of every property in town, it's hard to tell people exactly how much their taxes did go up.
You're absolutely right, and that happens just about every year. One year, colonials will be in greater demand than split levels, and we'll have to raise the assessed valuations of colonials townwide, or one neighborhood will have a hotter sales track record than another, and the assessments in that neighborhood will increase disproportionately to another neighborhood. People don't understand that, but the rule that you can go by is just to look at your assessed valuation on your actual tax bill when it comes out, multiply that times the tax rate, and that's what your bill's going to be. So this year, we're projecting a 39-cent per thousand increase in the tax rate, 39 cents per thousand, which will result in, if you have the average, we figure the median valued single-family residence in Medfield is somewhat shy of 600,000, but if you take 600,000 as the number, do the math, the tax bill for a house from last year's tax year to this year's tax year, the tax bill would increase $234, I think is what it comes up to be. So you take your assessed valuation as the actual number, multiply it times the tax rate, and that's going to tell you what your increase is for your particular property.
Ed, how have the values of the properties been holding up in Medfield over the past several years?
I asked Stan that question because I knew you'd ask it, Pete. You ask it every year.
Oh, do I?
It's a good question. He said 2012 sales, and these are dated, obviously, because here we are near the end of 2013. But calendar year 1/1 through 12/31/2012, residential values across the board went up about 0.75%. Broken down into single family and condos, condos went up 1.5%, single families went up 0.65%. But that, again, that's 2012. 2013, so far this year, he says, sales are much hotter. You'll see values go up significantly more this year. He says the strength of the market is in the mid-range prices, again around the $600,000 range, plus or minus 100,000. The upper end houses they've gone up, but they haven't gone up as much when you get to $1.5 million or what have you. Those haven't increased on a percentage basis as much as the mid-range properties in this calendar year 2013. So I think we're out of the recession, assuming things continue to go as they have been going. Hopefully we'll continue the uptrend. Medfield has, I think, done relatively well compared with most towns around in terms of coming through the real estate decline over the past several years. But we've still felt the effect of it, obviously.
Oh, that's good to hear. Good. I'm guessing that we're maybe 4 or 5 years into the Patriot software system. How's that working out? Is it longer than that?
I think we're in the fourth or fifth year.
Yeah, it's all
Because I think we had an initial contract of 3 years. and that's
Right,
been up,
yeah.
so I think we're going into the fifth year. Seems to work very well.
Good.
But it's, as much as it is Patriot, it's the operator, Stan, who's putting the numbers in that really makes a difference.
Oh,
I
good,
mean,
okay.
software can only take you so far. Fortunately, Stan knows every house in town. He knows how to operate the system very well, so we're fortunate to.
I think it's remarkable how few appellate tax board cases you guys have. I mean, you get maybe, 1 or 2 a year, and that's remarkable. Some towns have hundreds, and it's because you guys and Stan know the system so well and do such a good job at it that saves us a lot of money.
the system really is very helpful too, and it's respected. Patriot system is respected by the Department of Revenue, which obviously opens the door to our having a leg up on another town that might not have that software system. But we've been very fortunate. We have very few appeals, and we try to win them when we have them. Our track record's been a fortunate one.
Very good, yeah, yeah.
And Stan's been here forever, because I know that when I bought my house in '89, he came to see me.
I said that, I remember when he came.
And if you ask me, he probably knows your map and lot number.
Yes, he does, yeah.
I was fascinated, because we bought our house after the bank had foreclosed on it at the time, and the minute we moved in, 5 houses on our street went up for sale, and Stan stood in our kitchen and said, "Your neighborhood's driving me crazy on values."
Can I just ask you just
Absolutely.
one more point? Actually, with actually dealing with the hospital, which is going to be probably the largest issue over the next several years that are coming up, what role do you see the Board of Assessors, what role can you play, should you be playing, as we begin to look to see what is going to happen at the former Medfield State Hospital grounds?
Well, I would think our role, we're part of the financial team of the town of Medfield, so our role, needless to say, is to size up the costs, the cost of acquisition, potential liabilities, costs of cleanup. And speaking for myself, I would look to that, if the town were to go ahead and acquire the property, I would look for some revenue producing outcome. I really think we have to be realistic about Medfield's being 94% residential, and we should try to expand our tax base if we can. I think the talk about senior housing is wise talk. I think if we want to, and I know both of you are very much in favor of trying to retain as many of our seniors as we can. We need the housing, the first floor bedrooms that don't exist in Medfield. And I just hope we don't go ahead and plan to buy it and mothball it. I would personally have a lot of trouble with that. But again, getting back to what our role would be, I would think it would be to size up the cost benefit for the town and see what the impact might be, short term, intermediate term, and long term to the town of Medfield. As you say, Richard, that is the biggest issue, I think, to face this town in decades.
Have you had a chance to meet with the State Hospital Review Committee at all?
I haven't met with the committee, but I went on the tour that you and Bill Massaro put on. I was very impressed with what you had to say. I have probably more questions as a result, but I thought you did a great job in making the presentation. I intend to.
But the Board of Assessors as a whole has not gone before the Hospital Review
No,
Committee?
we haven't.
No, I think we can provide a lot of insights to it, to value, and try to put a realistic spin on, what possible uses, could be there. Sometimes people outside the real estate industry, sometimes they take on views that just, you can almost immediately dismiss as not being feasible. And I think we could, shed some light on that.
So it might be a good idea if you guys maybe were invited to that meeting and kind of had some discussions with them.
There is a visioning session next
Yeah.
month that I think you may have got an invitation that way.
Send us an invite, we'll see what's happening. I'm due with my 6th grandchild on December 11th, so I can't make any promises, but that could be a good meeting to attend, yeah. But I find that the website connections, the links are really excellent. You can get on the list of being in touch with what's happening. There's a good survey out there. So even without going to meetings, I think you can be pretty well informed as to what's going on. But yeah, I would like to attend some meetings, definitely.
Just make a comment and think. One of the places you might consider is applying a test of reason to any information that comes out of any consultant. I'm sure we're gonna hire some consultants here as we start trying to market the property and everything else. And one of the things that I saw happen at some of the other hospitals, particularly in Lexington and everything else, was a big shock that came to the town that the property had been overassessed, and that the tax revenues that came to the town as a result of the development in Lexington was somewhat less than the consultants had told them they could get. So I would ask that when we start looking at properties, what might go up there, what kind of developments might go up there, that you apply a test of reason based on your experience here to whatever numbers come in on evaluation of the property. Thank you.
I know that in the past, you guys have had the senior work-off people, and that's been very useful for you, and that there was an issue for a while about not getting the people back that had the experience that you found useful. Has that been a continuing problem, or wasn't there some sort of lottery?
Still a lottery, so we don't know who we're getting.
Oh.
And, you know, to train them to go out and visit
Frank, could you just
properties,
use the
Yeah.
microphone? Thank you.
To train them to go out and list the properties, collect the information we need, takes time. And by the time we get them trained, they're no longer, they've used up the work-off program allowance, so, you know, and then the next year we get somebody else, so that
So you're spending a lot of time training people instead of
if
getting
we
work.
can have the same people, there's a continuity there that really is valuable to us.
Who sets the guidelines on the work program?
Council on Aging.
Council on Aging, and, yeah, and I think the Veterans Agent and you guys kind of work with them, yeah. There is a issue the selectmen have been discussing, and that's, you're allowed to go up to $1,000 per participant. And there was, the reason it was kept at 500 a few years ago was so they could increase the number of participants in the program rather than increase the dollar amount of money. You might want to talk to them about how that is financed, although that's changing too. Now that they have to go on payroll because of the IRS regulations, but if you increase it from $500 to $1,000, that's what, another $32,500.
In our overlay account.
In your
I think
overlay.
we had that discussion
Yeah.
when we met with the selectmen in September, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And that budget is pretty tight. But what we do as well, though, is we're not limited to the work-off program. We do have another person who does go out and do inspections for us. We pay him by the hour, so it's not as if we're totally bereft if we're absent the work-off program folks, but they are very helpful. Frank is absolutely right. If you get a good person, you want to keep them. We do have that ability. We do have some money in the one of the line items in the budget. We went over the 7-year cyclical review aspect of our budget. So we still can do that.
Yeah, we are concerned now because of the IRS coming in. I believe they came into Dover and cited them for violations.
We heard about that.
So that the treasurer is now going to pay everyone on payroll. So that will take it off the overlay and require an appropriation, because you can't charge a payroll check to the overlay. So you may want to factor that in next year when you're considering the amount of overlay, because if we have to appropriate funds for that purpose, then you may be able to reduce your overlay somewhat too.
Mike, how would that be done? Each department would just increase their budget to that amount? Was it?
Well, we don't know, whether it's a single article with an appropriate, probably would be a single article and appropriation
Cover
because it's
the whole
spread
thing.
over so many departments. The problem is it may discourage people from participating in the program because it could affect their Social Security benefits. That you have to take 7.5% deduction for participation in the SMART plan, and the IRS is now ruled that the SMART plan is a defined pension plan, is a qualified pension plan for purposes of determining Social Security benefits. So some people, it would cost them more, depending on their particular situation, to participate in the program than they would earn. And for,
Program that works, and you make it.
yes. And then you let billions of dollars go by and, big banking and tax breaks and everything else it's
So
seen.
like you're saying, it would no longer be categorized as an abatement against the tax bill?
I don't believe you can charge a payroll check to an abatement to an overlay account, unless there's maybe something the Assessors Association is going to have to deal with. I assume this is going to have to be done statewide if the IRS takes this position.
But I thought the state
Hard and fast on it.
couched within the context of its being an abatement, and that's why it would apply against our overlay. How does
They-
that law change?
Well, the IRS supersedes the state,
Okay.
so it's, and it may have to be resolved because it doesn't make any sense to do it as a payroll check, but I don't know how else you would take the payroll deductions if you don't do it on a payroll check.
That's gonna be a paperwork nightmare for the treasurer tax collector.
And for the participants in the program, all of a sudden they're going to get a W-2 for $480 or so, $500, whatever. It's silly, but
Well, as a policy matter, I would hope that the town could go up to $1,000 per participant, because I think that extra $500 might encourage one or two of them, or who knows how many of them, to stay in town. And I think that that's a good financial investment for the town to be making for fairly short money if we can keep the seniors in town. I think it's worth spending the money on them that
We can
way.
Look at that again, I suppose. Again, I think our overlay is print as it is. I did look into, I think Richard requested some review of the Sudbury
Mhm.
special legislation.
Yeah.
I looked into that, and what it does is follow the Massachusetts income tax circuit break tax credit. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
Circuit breaker, they call it.
Yep.
And it's based upon income, assessed valuation of your house, et cetera, et cetera. It's a long checklist, age 65, et cetera. In Sudbury, it's all of those requirements that the mass income tax credit requires and allows. Plus, you have to be a resident for 10 years. But the weakness in the law is that there is no asset limitation necessarily. So you could have an unusually low income, and there are ways to do that from a legal perspective, trusts and what have you, and be worth several $1 million and still qualify for that tax exemption. That's the weakness in the law. So the way Sudbury sees it is they see that town and that law as it applies to that town. And this is the first fiscal year they've had, fiscal year 2014, as a pilot program for the state. So they are under that law now. They are applying it. Their assessors are working with it. They're struggling with it, but they see themselves as playing it out for 3 years before anyone else, such as Medfield, might even consider it. The legislation requires the town meeting had to vote it first time around, and then has to re-vote it a second time, I believe in another 3 years, after they can look back on it and see how it's worked. It could be significantly expensive to Medfield if we engaged it. I think we can watch it, but just to give you an update on the status of it, that's what it is and where it is.
And you need special legislation from the state, don't you, to enact
Well, it could
it?
be that if it works out in Sudbury, the Mass legislature will allow it across as a general law, not special legislation. You know what I mean, Pete?
Yeah.
So I think it's in limbo right now. What they have done there is to establish an asset limitation of $1.5 million. That's what they're experimenting with now in Sudbury, the Board of Assessors, including everything, your primary residence, IRAs, cash value of life insurance policies, everything whatsoever under the sun that you may have an ownership interest in. They're experimenting with that, but jury's out. That's where it is in any event. So
Interesting.
we did look into that a little.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I knew that's been making a lot of news lately, that
Thanks for taking a look at that.
Can I also ask on the work-off program, it's by a lottery system, and is there an economic factor, an income factor, or can anybody in town that's
I
a
don't think
senior
there's an
citizen?
income requirement.
So it's
No.
just,
Roberta does that.
Yes. They had a long debate over that. They decided that they wanted to encourage people to do it, and it was not to be a social program. It was to be, to take advantage of their talents and to give them a little tax break.
so it's just anyone who's over 60,
Anyone over
65?
65, yeah.
65.
65?
And then we added, you recall, we added 1 or 2 veterans.
That was done, yeah, that was done this year. In fact, we have to have a couple of articles. They determined that there's some statutes you have to accept, so we'll be putting those on for the annual town meeting. But we adopted that program. They don't expect to have, they don't want it to compete. You can't be in both programs. They don't want to compete with the senior tax work-off. And the veterans agent only expects 2 to 4 people to participate initially. It may grow eventually, but
So is it 60 or 65, you know?
for this tax work-off, I
For the
believe it's,
work-off program, right,
I believe it's
I
65.
think it's
Yeah.
65,
65.
but I'm not sure.
Would it make sense to talk to Roberta to see if there's some way that the assessors at least can get people that are more useful to them in the future, instead of having to train new people every year?
Sure, yeah. It's a little difficult with the lottery system, but if they have
That's a
extra
fair
slots, but yeah.
Issue for them.
Right.
They don't
Yeah.
want,
Right.
just because somebody has a certain skill there, they get in every year,
Yeah.
so.
I think
But
they're-
maybe if they could have a pool of people that the assessors have trained, that at least the people from that pool could go back to the assessors every year if they win the lottery.
Well, I think what's happened in a couple of instances with the assessors and with the accounting department and probably some others, they found the people so valuable that they've actually paid them.
Oh,
They've dropped out of the tax work-off program, gone into the budget, and they've used them for additional hours, because when you get somebody really valuable, it's still a bargain. So,
okay. I just had one final thing to ask about, which is that I get these emails from
We're
the,
gonna start charging by the hour here now.
I guess I won't ask then because I can't afford it. I get these emails from the Department of Revenue, the Local Assistance Bureau, I think it's called, and they just have huge amounts of helpful information in terms of how to run towns. A lot of it is clearly addressed to assessors. And I'm wondering if you guys get all that assistance from the DOR as well. I mean, the last email newsletter that they sent me was all about the Chapter 61 land, the forest. I read that with great interest after we had the Kenny property, and I wish I'd had it before we had the town meeting on the Kenny property, but it just came last week or the week before.
Yeah, I saw that, but regularly I don't see.
Oh, you don't get those?
You know,
They're worth subscribing to. I'll send you the next time one comes, because I don't think I save them, so.
We received the MAAO, Massachusetts Association of Assessing Officers publication. And do we receive the Mass League of Cities and Towns?
MMA, I think you do the Beacon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beacon, right.
and then you get the IGRs.
Bulletins directly from DOR.
IGS,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So,
Those are usually very helpful, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the state really seems to be trying to help towns to run everything properly, but, so, well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
all the information.
Thanks.
And if the assessors are gonna leave, I guess we might as well just shut the operation down now, huh?
Be sure to sign and send in the DOR so we can get the tax rate.
We actually do have 3 other things to do, other than assessors. Number 1 is vote to sign Phase 4 Special Project Designation Area and Power Plant Area Groundwater Remedy Implementation Plan to be mailed to DCAMM. Can someone explain what that is?
Yeah, did you want to say, Bill?
Bill,
Probably
thank you.
better, Yeah.
This is the thing that
This is-
Peg
this
drafted for us?
basically- yeah, this
Or
is
Andrea?
remediation of the CBOC plume that was found starting up in the area of the laundry building.
Okay, this is the thing that went around in the past week or
Right.
two then, yep,
Right.
okay.
And basically, it It's not, I mean, they're not terribly high levels, I mean, compared to as bad as they might be, but they are definitely above the drinking water standards.
And some of our LSPs from the Shirk had some input into it. I know that
They did.
Ralph Tella had some comments, and
Ralph had comments, so Andrea Stiller made her comments. I made some comments. I'm gonna take one look at what you guys are gonna be signing to send out. I haven't seen the final draft of it or anything. If I think I need to add something, I usually send my own letter in anyway. If I have nothing to add, basically, I'm just gonna write on yours this time because I did make comments to Shirk on it. It's fairly straightforward. The real issues will be the monitoring and the testing to ensure that they're getting the remediation that they want. It's an injection of chemicals to essentially break down the plume.
And so that's what I was going to try to summarize for the people that are watching that may not have followed this as closely as you, Bill, that basically there is the volatile organic compound plume at the state hospital going from the former laundry building that's now been torn down towards the river, and that DCAMM has this way of remediating that by injecting oxidants which will react with the volatile organic compounds and render them harmless, apparently. And I know that there was a lot of discussion in the materials about exactly what reactant to use, and that was sort of a discussion that went over my head. But they've picked one that that they're gonna inject down into the ground, and I guess it'll get rid of the volatile organic compounds. So the good news is that they're doing what they should be doing to get rid of it.
Basically, we probably had our first pass at commenting on the statement of work that they originally proposed for this in, I want to say, January of 2011 was the first time that this came up. And we made our comments on the statement of work, and then recently, basically, they tore down the laundry building to have better access to run a test program to pick which of the chemicals that they would use and how well they would transmit through the soil. And then, as a result of that, they determined where they needed to make the injections of this chemical and how many of them that they needed to make. But the main issues that we will have, again, as I said, is how are you going to monitor the results, for how long, what kind of data is going to be available, and what have you. So, and at the moment, in general, I believe that everybody is satisfied with what DCAMM has proposed.
And is this, even from the beginning, is this what you anticipated was going to happen? Or was there an alternative way to?
This, it's called ISCO, I think is the synonym, in situ chemical oxidation or injection of the chemicals. They presented this back, at least in 2011, in one of the presentations as their recommended choice. We never really objected to it.
The wells that are out in the middle of the Charles River had volatile organic compounds in them, and the town built a treatment facility there, and that treatment facility the only thing it did really was it pumped the water up, and then it cascaded the water down over a series of ping pong balls, and the volatile organic compounds would gasify as they were exposed to the air just from pouring down over the ping pong balls, and that's how that well was treating the volatile.
That's the one in the Millis line, right? And
Yep.
there was some
By
suggestion that perhaps Truska or something was involved in that, correct?
Yeah, that plume disappeared, and there's no trace of it now, and
It was never actually
Plan isn't
traced to
really
anybody
operating.
in particular.
So is that process no longer being used?
no.
Oh, it's
they've
not?
Shut it
Yeah,
down. yeah.
we could sell that if you want to try to sell that on eBay.
Yeah. It seemed kind of ironic to me that what you do, the treatment method is you put it in the air so you breathe it instead of drink it.
Yeah, it is odd, isn't it? And that's okay.
How long has that not been used? How long have we been off of using
I'd
that?
say probably about 3 years,
Okay.
at least, yeah.
Because that was over $1 million to construct, right, if I remember?
Around
right.
600,000.
I think it's 600,000.
600,000?
Yeah.
But I think don't you have to use the treatment, don't you have to push the water up over the ping pong balls?
No,
We
it's
can
been shut down.
bypass
But
it.
what you have to do is you have to chlorinate the water that comes out of there now.
Oh.
Because once you take it out of the ground, the DEP requires you chlorinate it.
We don't use that well as much as some of the other
No,
ones.
because it has the higher levels of chlorine, and the one thing we get objection to more than anything in Medfield The one thing I hear constant complaints about is I can taste chlorine in the water. But I hear it all the time from people all over town.
I noticed.
The water used to be wonderful, now I can,
It's different.
it's terrible, it's got chlorine in it.
And-
I don't
and-
notice it.
Well, see, I don't taste that on mine. I wonder if
I
it's
don't taste it
different
mine.
parts of town,
I-
from different water sources, or?
It probably is, you know, I don't know how water flows through the pipes, but it seems to, I know when we use wells number 1 and 2, we get more complaints from the west end of town, you know, the Bridge Street area and down that part of town, because there are higher.
Well, I hear that too. In my
Concentrations.
water, I taste none. I mean, my water tastes fine.
I don't notice it. I think some people are probably much more sensitive to chlorine than others, and I fall in the insensitive category, I guess. So,
Yeah, well, some people smell better and taste better. And,
yep.
so, do we have a motion to sign that letter then? to
I
DCAMM?
make a motion and move that we sign the letter that is to be mailed to DCAMM.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. And our next issue is a vote to authorize Town Administrator, Mr. Michael Sullivan, to sign the amendment number 1 for Town Garage Project. Mike?
Right, this is an amendment to provide for project manager services during construction. They've actually been working without a contract since
nice.
construction started. The original contract was to take it up through the bidding phase. And the committee met with Daedalus, who's the project manager, and they voted to recommend and authorize Mike Quinlan to sign in their behalf, and to recommend to the selectmen that you approve the contract amendment.
And the contract goes through the completion of the project, is that how it's worded?
Yes, yeah. I believe the total cost for the entire amount is $417,000.
I would move that we authorize Mike to sign that amendment.
Second.
Any further discussion?
And normally we'd have the chairman sign it, but he isn't here tonight, so it's easier to have authorized me to sign it. So-
Absolutely. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. And then we have free cash information.
Yeah, that came in this afternoon, that's why it wasn't on the agenda last week. Free cash was certified at $2,670,000, I believe, so.
I'm sorry, what was that figure, Mike?
$2,670,000. Is that correct, Evelyn? Do you have it over there? See how close I was? I think it was $600 too, or something. Yeah.
67066.
I was off $660, yeah. And then there's also a certification of free cash for the enterprise funds. The Water Enterprise Fund free cash is $351,840. And the sewer free cash, enterprise free cash is $542,290.
Is that 267, is that high, low, average? How
It's
is
high.
that?
It's last year was 2.3, so it did go up a couple $100,000. I know Gus Murby has been interested in increasing the amount we're putting away for our OPEB, unfunded health insurance liability, so that will perhaps allow us to do something along those lines. You have to be careful, though, because it can go up or down in 1 year. There's a lot of
You don't know,
factors.
right.
Yeah.
You don't know what emergency could happen or something either, right?
Yeah, and you don't know if uncollected taxes go up, if you don't turn back as much money from
Right.
budgets, if your local receipts or state aid drops down, it
Right.
can affect it, so.
Mike, in this past year, because of Willis Peligian having created his tool to calculate water and sewer rates, I've gotten to know more about that area. And his tool was designed to have the free cash, I think it is, the reserves, they called it the reserves,
Yes,
at 300,000.
yes.
And is that just the water reserves, or is that the water and sewer? Because I see that the water is 351,000, and the sewer is 542,000.
That was, each one, I believe, was 300,000.
was
So the sewer's in
300,000,
very
okay.
good shape.
Yeah,
That's why they did not increase the sewer rates this year.
Okay.
The water, they increased 25%, And that, they're, in anticipation of several projects they have coming down the road, the water tower, the water mains, painting the Mount Nebo water tower. It was interesting. They interviewed consultants a couple of weeks ago for, and you'll have that contract next week for signature for the water tower design. And one of the consultants was saying, which is we've experienced ourselves, it costs more to repaint a water tower than to build it.
Holy smokes.
They were saying if you have a water tower, costs you $500,000, $600,000 to build a water tower, it probably costs you $1 million to paint it. And the reason is, they're tall, there have to be special types of paints that don't chip, and they don't have certain chemicals in them that would get in the water. And the other thing is you have to paint the inside and the outside, so you don't think of painting the inside of a water
It's gotta be
tower.
horrible to paint the inside of a water tower. You probably have to wear a respirator the whole time.
There's all kinds of procedures they have to take.
Well, when you get a new water tower, it's already painted inside and out, correct?
Yes.
So they've already done that process. How long does that last? on average?
10 to 15 years initially. Now, one of the interesting things they're talking about is they are starting to use fiberglass coated tanks, where they're coated inside and outside. You have steel, but the inside and outside of the steel is coated with fiberglass. And they say it's almost a very impervious finish and does not have to be painted. And I said, well, what about if you get, minor earthquake, or if you get kids throwing stones at it, and that sort of thing? And they said they've had very good experience. Now, I don't know, there are other factors that come into play as to whether that's the ultimate design they'll choose. But it does play into it when you think of how much it costs to paint a water tower. I think our water tower, Mount Nebo water tower, when it was built, cost $476,000. We've had it repainted once. That was around $700,000 to repaint it.
Wow.
So it does in fact cost more to paint it than it does to build it. One of the other suggestions, which I think they don't feel is appropriate in New England, that might work in the Midwest where everything's fairly level, but here where we have higher elevation things, but some places they build what they call low ground tanks. So they're not way up in the air, they're low to the ground, and you pump water constantly into the tanks so that you're not, it's a visibility thing, you don't see it, but it's also, you save the painting, it's quite a bit less to maintain them because you don't
Does it
have
still
to.
hold the same amount of water?
Yes, but you have to pump 24 hours a day,
So you get
cost-
electrical costs would be
electrical
higher?
cost, yeah, quite a bit higher. So there are a lot of things they're looking at. They haven't decided what the design, that's what they're going to work with the engineer on, take a look at, but
And they hope to have that by town meeting in the spring?
yes, it's going to be a tight squeeze. If they don't have the bid price, they will have a very firm estimate on it. And there is a fiberglass tank that was built in Medway recently. So that might be one you'd want to take a look at if you're out there at all.
Well, I think the assessors have gone home. I think the selectmen and the town administration.
Time to go home and start making the Thanksgiving dinner, huh?
Can I just ask just a couple of things? Are we starting, when we come back, we'll have a calendar of what is going to happen, right? So that'll be coming up. And then I was confused at the last meeting. How did we leave the bylaws on the hospital? How was that left? We were going to send that
I
back
think-
to the,
I think we're
I think
going to
you-
check with the
I
charter
think
bylaw committee.
I think you asked Mark to meet with Russ Hallisey and go over what needed to be done and how that would dovetail in with what they are working on. You wanted him to review them, and
so Mark is going to get with Russ on that?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I just had I'll bring this up now because it's coming up quick. With Lords now gone, I had somebody call and ask, usually when we have the tree lighting and the parade that's coming up, there was always kind of the midnight madness that was with Lords. And the question was, are any of the businesses in town going to continue with that tradition? And I didn't have an answer to that. I don't know if Memo or any businesses, if you've heard, is there going to be...
Was Butterflies or something gonna do that? I'm not sure. In the Medfield books.
They're going to stay open
Store, I
till
think
midnight?
so, yeah.
I don't know, it's midnight.
And then Dwight
Right, Santa
Derby
Claus
was
is gonna
gonna
be at
have,
the Dwight Derby.
Right, Derby.
yeah, with the
Oh,
photographs.
winter book's still good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the UCC has a choir,
Yeah, they always do
presentation,
that. That they do a nice program there.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed next door, they've already got the lights out on the trees. that
Yeah, looks
start to
nice.
look good.
Looks nice, yeah.
So, kind of makes up for the Lord's being in dark.
Missing Lords.
Yeah.
And then,
The other thing too is I don't know if you've noticed, they've started putting the paintings on the traffic light
I did,
boxes.
yeah.
When I first saw the one, I thought it was a little bit strange, the dog, but apparently that was a monk's painting.
It was. There was a Dr. Mitchell that was here for many, many years, from the early 1900s into the 1940s, and he had a dog named Jack that went everywhere that he went. And the story goes that he was down by the Charles River during a flood time, and Dr. Mitchell fell in, and the dog Jack actually went into the river, and he was able to hold on and save him. So he had the painter, John Monks, do a painting of the dog Jack. And actually, when Dr. Mitchell died, he put into his will that Jack was to be buried with him in the same cemetery plot. So when Dr. Mitchell was taken up to his cemetery plot in Maine, and when Jack died, sure enough, they brought Jack and they buried him up. But that painting is it's a local famous painting, which is in the Historical Society, of the dog Jack. So that's why
They put it on there.
the dog is on that, because of the monk's painting.
I thought it was brilliant of them to pick things that were local and had real historic local significance. I mean, over in Newton, when they do it, the things that they put on the boxes seem to have absolutely zero connection to the town, as far as I can tell.
Hmm.
But, I mean, the other thing that's on the side of this box is it's a photograph of the Monk's Block with the fountain and the big tree out in the middle of the
I
intersection.
love the tree in the middle of North Street,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, an elm tree.
And then maybe the last thing, just
And it was too cold. They couldn't finish the installation
They had to
because it was so
stop.
cold.
Yeah,
They,
yeah, they're gonna put a tent,
vinyl.
tented or something so they can
yeah,
finish
they have to
it.
get
so.
some- Well, or else,
And they're going to do one in front of CVS also, is that correct?
yeah. And I think that,
The Medfield
I was
too.
talking to Jean, because I stopped when she was in the process of overseeing the work on Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, and I think that she started with 3, but she's got, because Memo is funding the one that's in front of the bank. She's got the one in front of CVS funded by an anonymous source, and I think that she said that someone else had stepped forward, APC. Montrose is doing one, and that's right. And
Yes,
I think, but
was
because of,
APC, I
because
think,
of
yeah.
seeing what was going on Saturday, that I think that the people from APC said that they wanted to fund one.
So they're
that-
up to 4? That's
And I
great.
think that she has 1 or 2 more that are available.
I mean, we'll be like Providence, we'll have our own blue bug.
What's the blue bug?
Oh, there's a very famous, when you drive through Providence, you go down to the Providence airport, there's a giant blue bug on top of one of the buildings, and
Oh,
it's become sort of a symbol of
It's a termite, yeah.
Nibbles Woodaway.
It's like out in Worcester, there's that polar bear on the top of the bottling company out
Polar
there.
company has it, yeah.
I actually heard Providence was on the news because they had pop-up chalkboards where people could write down things about, they were asking them very specific sorts of predictions or something. And I thought, what a cool idea that is to have, because I
Well-
think people like to have that type of engagement.
Well, that's similar to what they had here over for Medfield Day, where
Yeah,
you
they
could
did
write
that, correct.
what do you want in the park,
I
so.
I immediately thought, man, what a nice idea for the sides of Lords to have a chalkboard where
As long as you have a good censor.
Yeah.
you have an eraser. It's like Wikipedia. Whoever thought that Wikipedia would work, where people could do what they wanted, write what they wanted.
And maybe the last thing just was to, with Thanksgiving coming up, the traditional high school football game against the Raiders of Dover-Sherburne. We've been playing since 1966, so good luck to the the Warriors and the seniors particularly that this would be their last game. The game this year is in Dover, so good luck to them.
And this time of year, the home committee is very active and recognizing the elderly, the needy, and people who have lost a family member during the past year. So they do a tremendous amount of work.
Absolutely tremendous. Behind-the-scenes job they do.
Anything else?
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. I guess we're adjourned then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.